At the start of every year, I like to set a bit of a focus. I also do this monthly most of the time, but the year is more of an overarching one. I'm not totally one for resolutions, but I love to think about where I want to be in a year, then what's actually achievable, and make a goal from there. A lot of business owners I know like to choose a word for the year. They want to focus on that thing for the year or something to work on, like finding in their life. For me, that's just not specific enough and a little too ambiguous. I also know a few people whose word has come back to bite them in weird ways. Maybe mine did a little last year, but it just helps me focus on it so much more when it's a phrase rather than just a word. Welcome to the Digital Hive podcast, where we talk all things marketing for creative small businesses. Last year, my phrase was less is more, and I downsized a bunch of stuff. My phrase of the year for 2024 is compounding efforts. By that, I mean that I'll be focusing on doing lots of small things while not thinking that any one thing is going to make a massive improvement to any part of my life. So it'll be all about working on things consistently with an expectation of slow, reasonable growth. All the goals I have for this year rely on me doing repeated efforts and work that will all build on each other and create somewhat of a J curve if it were a graph. We'll see how sharp that graph gets, but that's how I want to set expectations of both the work and the results. I'm meaning podcasting for growing the audience means I'll need to do regular episodes, have guests on, be a guest on other podcasts. For SEO, working on different blogs with lots of different search terms. Creating Pinterest content is the same because I use Tailwind to reshare the content. And the more content I have, the more pins, the more reach, the more traffic to the website. In many platforms like social media, once the ball starts rolling, you can start to gain momentum. And there's an aspect of that to this because by being on a few other podcasts as a guest, I have a bit more proof and then I can go on larger shows and build on from there. On Pinterest, there's an element of them showing other pins from me to people who engage with my other pins. By working on them more consistently, those small acts add up, but by doing more of them, it can have a bigger impact sooner. Part of this work will be a test of patience for me because it's not that I'm going to do a few things and be able to see a sharp increase in any one thing. It'll take time for things to get better, for things to start working together, and I'm just going to have to keep at it to reach those goals. Last year, I did a bit of tracking where I wanted to do X number of blog posts and podcasts and so on, and so it meant that my goals weren't reach or engagement based or something other in analytics, but focused on the only part I could control, which was creating, but also publishing. This worked well for me, but I wanted to scale it up for this year and see how much of my goals I can reach by being more consistent throughout the year. My life is a little more streamlined, so I should be able to focus on less things. I spoke about my health stuff a bit in the wrap-up episode of last year, but essentially health is one of those things in general that you just have to keep working on, but I'm working on it in small amounts of things every day to improve my overall health. Essentially, that's the same approach I want to bring to the business. There's not much I can do about this one but be patient, and that's that at some point this year, I'll chop the dyed hair off my head. For the audio listeners, you can't see this, but I started growing out my grey hair in July, and I actually really like it, but there's a line where I stopped dyeing it, and that's the part I don't love, but it's just temporary. I just have to wait and look after my hair and my scalp so it's not damaged, but it's going to take time. I'll literally be able to see that time pass on my head. I refuse to let that affect me doing anything on camera, so you'll see varying hair throughout the year where I've batched things, but I just don't care about those details right now. I guess a little bit of it will be looking after my hair and my health in general, but it's mostly patience. I'm also working on finishing some crafting and DIY projects. I've got so many books I want to read, and I'll need to make it a habit to make it happen. There's a lot of them, but also I can go 2 months without reading, and then in a week I'll read 2 books. So I need to balance that out and pick one up, just a little bit more often. Essentially, this phrase is accurate for my whole life. What I'm conscious of with this focus for the year, though, is that I don't want to burn out, so I can't do it all at once. I'm planning to try a few different ways of focusing, either by day or by week, but not changing too much between modes in any one day. I'm trying to build habits so that this is worked into a routine that I can feel good about, but also I'm prioritizing and checking in, so if I'm tired, it's not crucial that I work on my sewing project tonight, but I need to dedicate the energy I do have to writing a blog post, whereas on the weekend I might choose between which of the crafts I'm interested in or which one matches my energy levels. And naturally, I will be batching some things and keeping others spread out. I find that the batching helps me with the consistency because it's a bit more of a midterm deadline, and it means I can focus on something for a week or two, but then switch back to focusing on other things. I primarily work with creative small business owners, so that's more of who the content I'll be making over the course of the year will be tailored to. However, I think of creative as more of like a personality trait or a state of mind than it is a defining characteristic of the business itself. That means I work with people who have creative businesses, but also those who have businesses that aren't necessarily in a creative industry, but are themselves creative as a person. Over the next year, I want to work with new types of businesses. I've always done this in some ways because I never work with two businesses in the same location who do the same thing, because I'd be competing with myself. And there's less gray area with coaching and strategy, but I genuinely want the variety anyway. Part of this will be getting somewhat specific in my content for the creative industries, which I'd prefer to do on the blog the most, honestly. I won't necessarily be able to cover the non-creative industry ones as easily within those search terms, but I'll figure that one out somewhat at some point. With some of the formats of content I'll be creating this year, they're aimed at people who are at different stages of marketing, so it allows me to write about more of a range. I'm really looking forward to everything I've got planned. At some point, I'm hoping to figure out some new approaches to content and how I can repurpose points better across platforms. So I'm not always making new content constantly, but can do some reworking and recycling to share things in multiple places. Not to the point of repetition, but just so that it's a better use of my time. That also means that my efforts can compound a little more because the time spent ideating and figuring out what I want to say and how is more limited. Next episode, I'll be going through setting a marketing to-do list for the year, turning your approach and strategy into an actionable plan that you can sustainably work on throughout the year. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. I hope you've had a great break, had some space to reflect on what you want more of and less of in 2024, and are ready to tackle this year. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd truly appreciate it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the marketing strategy and coaching work I do, or to find more resources, head to honeypotdigital.com.